Etan, and Etan, we were just kind of talking here about the role of freshmen moving forward in college basketball, and I'm sure you heard Rick Pitino say, several weeks ago, I'm not recruiting freshmen anymore. It's all about the transfer portal. We just called up ESPN's top 100, and all the guys in the top 100 are still, for the most part, are signed to Power 4 programs if you include the Big East. What do you think the role of freshmen will be, moving forward in college basketball? You think coaches are going to move away from recruiting those guys? Do you think they still have a role, or do you think it truly is all about the portal?
I mean, I think as you go more and more, it's going to be more difficult for high school players. And now they change with JUCO, and I think the JUCO players, I try to keep track of what the rules is, but now I think they can keep 4 years of eligibility after they're in JUCO for a year or two. So that's going to change it even more. So you're just going to have guys that are just older, bigger, stronger, more developed than high school players. So that's going to put the high school players at a disadvantage. So you're going to see guys having to either go different routes or maybe having to wait their turn until they can play, and maybe sometimes redshirt. There's going to be different obstacles for high school players. It's not going to be like it was before.
Yeah, and I think this year's Syracuse team might be an example of that. If there was a Sadiq White and a Kyan Anthony coming in any other year, we'd be talking about how they were going to be starting, whereas now you've got players in the portal that are older and more experienced than them.
Definitely, and I think it's one of the things where guys are going to have to sometimes be patient, and it's hard when you have the name, Anthony behind you, that the expectations is going to, grow, enormously from the beginning. But it's just a different route unless you have somebody come in like they're a Cooper Flag or something like that. That when you have guys that are 5 years older than them, it's just going to be a difficult process. It's just the new landscape. That's what it is.
Can you speak to that transition, Etan, from high school to college? Because, you were obviously an NBA talent. Maybe you didn't know it, your senior year in high school. Maybe you did. I don't know. But can you speak to, I guess, that jump that players have to make going from high school to college and the difference in the two games? Does it take, a year or two for most players to get to the point where they need to be able to be impact players and be able to compete?
It depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about Carmelo Anthony,
yeah, right, true, right.
Different. But for me, yeah, I need that my freshman year, learning and battling with Otis every day in practice, talking about Otis Hill and what I learned from him, and doing all the workouts with Bernie Fine and Coach Orr, that helped me. It helped prepare me. I just had to be patient. Sometimes right now, especially with the transfer portal, you don't necessarily have to be patient as much. You can kind of just move around if you don't like the way that you're developing in your first year. And sometimes there's something to just being a little patient. Now, sometimes coaches have to be patient as well, because a lot of times coaches, their job is on the line, so they don't have time to be patient with your developing freshmen. You know what I mean? Into the future, they have to win now. So then they go and try to get a ready-made player. That's why you see people like Rick Pitino make the statements that they made. He's like, no, I can't replace, Kadari and these guys that I have now with freshmen. I want to win right now. So I want to replace them with guys that are ready to step in and have college experiences. So it's just a whole different landscape. It's not like the older days.
I'm actually curious now, because I phrased the question that way. When did you realize that the NBA was a realistic option for you? Did you know coming out of high school, or was it sometime during your experience at Syracuse?
Well, as you start listening to more, of the critiques and everything like that, then you start believing it more. But every player, by the time they're young, that's the dream. You know what I mean? But then as you get a little, further into it, then you see it a little bit more attainable. But my sophomore year, I had a pretty good sophomore year. After not playing that much my freshman year, then you started hearing a little bit of the feedback, and like, oh, okay, all right, well, let me just keep working, and it could be a possibility.
Yeah. We didn't ask you about the title game yet, or the Final Four for that matter. It's our first time we've had a chance to talk to you since then. What stood out to you from those games over the weekend?
Goodness gracious. So Houston had Well, first of all, going back to their game against Duke, I thought they had tremendous defense. They held Duke to one field goal in the final 10 minutes. It was absolutely amazing to see a game where defense actually won them the game over an opponent that they were, overmatched against. Duke had offensive weapons from everywhere, and they held them through defense. And yeah, that one call on Cooper Flag, I go on record saying I thought that was a terrible call, but that's not why Duke lost the game.
Right.
There's a lot more that transpired. You have to tip your hat off to Houston. Now in Florida, it was a complete collapse offensively of Houston in that second half. It was just a tale of two halves. I was kind of amazed because that first half, everything was just clicking, and then everything changed the second half. But again, you got to tip your hat to Florida. They had a tremendous comeback. You could say that the whistle kind of blew their way a little bit more in the second half, but that's how it is sometimes, But I thought the games were great. They were, when you have people, kind of wondering if the transfer portal and NIL is going to kind of ruin college sports. The game's all Final Four weekend. I thought they were great.
Yeah, we were treated to a great Final Four. Going back to that Duke-Houston game, Duke's up, 14 with 8 minutes to go. And I thought that maybe their first mistake, in my mind anyway, Etan, was that they seemed to kind of take their foot off the gas, and they started trying to milk the clock a little bit. They were, and you do that against Houston, you're going to end up with bad shots, and they did. And they had a bunch of empty possessions in a row. And why do we see coaches do that so often where they try, and I get why you want to shorten the game or burn the clock, but man, Duke had it rolling, and then all of a sudden they just took the air out of the basketball, and it really seemed to kind of change the complexion of the end of that game.
Yeah, you've seen coaches kind of have that strategy for decades. They want to they call it clock management or time management when they're up some and they, have a sizable lead and, just the clock is kind of winding down. But you're right. Against a team like Houston, they're going to press you up and you're going to turn you over and you're not going to get empty possessions. So it benefits you more to keep playing the way that you were playing. Just take good shots. That's something that they're going to have to think about because if they would have kept playing, then maybe they would have had a different outcome. But once you go into it's not stalling, but just, milking the clock a little bit, it kind of takes you out of your rhythm of what got you that lead. So, it's tough.
No doubt. You look at the NCAA tournament's most outstanding player, the Final Four MVP, Walter Clayton, who started his career at Iona. And again, we're talking about NIL and how the landscape of basketball has changed in the transfer portal. You think we're going to see more and more of this of, the best players in the game are going to be guys that started their careers at, mid-majors or in this case, a low Division I program in Iona?
Well, I think that's why you don't see Cinderellas because the Cinderellas, they transferred to a bigger program, and that's what makes it kind of tough on some of the, mid-majors and some of the smaller schools. You see the path that he had to take, and he developed into what he is now. He was a tremendous player. He was really impressive in the entire tournament. To your point, you'll see guys that have to start, a little bit and have to take different paths because now, coming out of high school, it's really going to be hard for high school players. It's a totally different landscape. So a lot of high school players, they're not going to be able to go to the big-time schools right off the jump because a lot of schools are going to be focused on the transfer portal. So you'll see more guys come through the ranks that way, go to a smaller school, and then transfer up. You'll see that a lot more now.
All right, lastly, I guess let's turn our attention to the Orange. And, we've seen what they've done in the transfer portal, to this point. They've added a point guard. They added a shooter. They've got a couple of big guys, both 6'9". Do you think they're done at the center position? I mean, in an ideal world, what else would you like to see, Red and his staff add in the portal here before, rounding out the rest of the roster?
Yeah, well, first, I like Nate George. I got a chance to watch him a lot this past season, and we needed a really solid point guard that could run the team, get everybody in their places. We needed that, and he is that person. I saw him. Did he lead the ACC in assists with 6 or 7 assists? I mean, I saw him in this. It was a stretch. I don't know, late January, February, I don't remember, but they had back-to-back wins against Louisville and Clemson, if you remember. But he almost scored, 30 points against Clemson. Like, he was light. So he can be that scorer if you need him to be. Now, I will say that he needs to improve a little bit on his defense, and defense was an issue that we had this past year, but that's just something that he's going to have to work on. But as far as, getting everybody into their places, and I like JJ at the 2. I would rather him not have to move over to the point. So if you talk about who we would need to add, I would say maybe look at a backup point guard. Because I want to keep JJ at the 2. I think that's where he's most effective. I think that's where he's most comfortable. I think that's where he needs to stay. We have Nate Kings, who I think is a good shooter. And as far as the bigs, we have 2 athletic bigs that can get out. They can run. We're going to play a faster tempo. They can catch lobs. They can rim protect. I think that's good. A good pickup. I think that we did well in the transfer portal, but I would add a backup point again, because for the main reason I want to keep JJ at the 2.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement on the backcourt. And going back to Nate George, you mentioned that stretch. He had 4 straight games against conference opponents in the ACC where he scored 20 or more points in a 4-game stretch. So as you said, he's not just an assist guy who led the conference in that category. He can also score the basketball as well, and they needed a guy like that could do a little bit of both.
Definitely agree.
All right, Etan. Great stuff as always. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Have a good one, fellas.
All right, you as well. Etan Thomas joining us here on the program. And with that, we'll take